In most of the great myths of the world, the hero begins his journey in order to obtain something. Sometimes that thing is a treasure, sometimes it's a weapon, sometimes a heavenly secret, or a power that can take a human being beyond the usual limits. I want to introduce a few cases very quickly as examples. Like in Greek mythology, Jason and the Argonauts set out on a dangerous journey to obtain the golden fleece, which is the fleece of the golden-winged fabulous ram Chrysomalos, which in Greek mythology is a treasure that is a symbol of sacred authority and a sign of legitimacy, power, and rulership. In the story, the hero must go to a distant land, pass through trials, face monsters and enemy kings, and in the end bring back with him something that has political and mythical value. In the stories of Heracles too, we repeatedly come across this same pattern. One of these missions is to bring back the golden apples of Hesperides, immortal fruits that are kept in a distant garden at the borders of the world, under the watch of heavenly guardians. Heracles must go to the end of the world in order to obtain something that belongs to the realm of the gods. The next case is in the myth of Prometheus, where the matter becomes even deeper. Prometheus steals fire from the gods and gives it to human beings. Fire here is of course not just a flame, it is a symbol of knowledge, industry, civilization, and the power of human beings to build the world. But the price of this gift is heavy. Zeus punishes him, binds him to a rock, and every day an eagle tears at his liver. So here too the story is about obtaining something that increases human power, even if this power is accompanied by suffering and curse. Actually, I'm saying these very briefly, and in summary, each one of these great and important stories of human literature is a world of meaning and hours of narration. The next case is the epic of Gilgamesh, where the king of the city of Uruk, after the death of his friend Enkidu, goes in search of the secret immortality. He cannot accept death, so he sets out on a terrifying journey to find a plant that restores youth. But just when he thinks he has reached what he wanted, a snake snatches the plant away. Gilgamesh returns empty-handed in the end, but this very journey began with the human desire to grasp life, immortality, and to obtain the plant of life and escape death. Even in medieval narratives, such as the quest for the Holy Grail, the knights set out on a spiritual and dangerous journey in order to reach this sacred object, a cup that is connected with the blood of Christ, healing, purity, and heavenly mysteries. Again, the pattern is familiar. The hero lacks something, so he travels in order to find it. Now it's getting interesting because I want to compare them with J.R.R. Tolkien. Because while he was familiar with all these stories and myths and knew them down to the smallest detail by heart and perhaps even taught them in his classes, comes and writes the strangest epic of the 20th century exactly in reverse. In all these examples that I gave, and many more than these can also be remembered with a little focus, I said that the hero's mission is to obtain something, or to carry out his mission with something he obtains. In the story of the Lord of the Rings, as Tolkien's best known and perhaps most important work, the hero does not begin his journey in order to find the treasure. From the very beginning, he has the treasure in his hand, or let's say in his pockets. The One Ring is in the Shire from the very beginning of the story, in the house of Bilbo Baggins, among the calm life of the hobbits, in a space that is neither like a battlefield, nor like a palace of kings, nor like a realm of gods and the mythical gardens of paradise. But this treasure, unlike mythical treasure, is not supposed to save the hero. It is not supposed to make him king. It is not supposed to give him glory, knowledge, or immortality. Rather, exactly the complete opposite. This treasure is cursed and ominous. Even the apparent long life and immortality that it gives, according to Bilbo's description, stretches the soul and makes it thin like a butter that has been scrapped over too much bread. And Frodo Baggins's mission is not to obtain something. His mission is to lose something. This is where the Lord of the Rings separates itself from many quest stories. In most epics, the hero moves toward position, but in Tolkien's word, the hero must learn to let it go. This story is not the epic of obtaining power, it is the epic of detaching oneself from power. The One Ring is, on the surface, a magical object. A small, simple, plain golden ring. It has no jewel, no obvious light shines from it. It only has some hidden writings. It does not shine in the hero's hand like legendary swords. But this small object is the most dangerous thing in whole Middle-earth, because the ring is an extension of Sauron's will, a part of his power. Hatred, desire for domination, and urge to control the world has been poured into it. Whoever takes the ring does not simply become the owner of a tool. Little by little it becomes aligned with Sauron's will. The ring makes promises. To Gandalf, it can give the promise of saving the world. To Galadriel, it can give the promise of glory and rule. To Boromir, it can give the promise of defense and salvation and the glory of Gondor. To Frodo, it can give the promise of security and meaning. And to Gollum too, it has given something much more basic. A position, a my precious. And this is exactly the danger of the ring. The ring does not only corrupt bad people, the ring corrupts even good intentions too. I also just named a clear example of this. Boromir, who never wanted to destroy the world, he only wanted to save his city. He wanted to protect Minas Tirith from the attack of Mordor. But the ring whispers to him that in order to save his people, he can use the same power that has made by the enemy. This is the great temptation in The Lord of the Rings, and the main question that is raised in this connection. Can good be made victorious with the tools of evil? Tolkien's answer is clear from the beginning. No. Tolkien explains this negative answer in detail in the chapter The Council of Elrond. In Tolkien's logic, some powers cannot be used well because the power itself is inherently built on domination, control, and breaking the will of others. The ring does not give someone power so that he becomes better. It gives him power so that he wants more, possesses more, commands more, and in the end becomes more and more like Sauron. That's why Gandalf is afraid of taking the ring. Not because he's weak, because he knows himself. The Gandalf that Tolkien had created knew that if he took the ring, perhaps at the beginning he would act with good intentions, perhaps he would want to defeat Sauron, but in the end, instead of the Dark Lord, a terrifying Lord of Light would come into being. Someone who perhaps in the name of good would drag the world into bondage and ruin. Later in the story, Galadriel too faces the same test. Frodo offers the rings to her as well, and for a moment we see her glorious and terrifying image. A great lady, beautiful, dreadful, and stronger than the foundations of the earth. She can take the ring and turn into a queen whom everyone loves and fears at the same time. But Galadriel triumphs because she says no. She lets go of power, and for that reason she does not fall. In Tolkien's world, the greatest victory does not always happen on the battlefield. The creator of this world tried very hard to explain that sometimes the greatest victory is the moment when a person can pick something up but does not pick it up, can rule but does not, can become an owner but lets it go. And this brings us to Frodo's narrative. Frodo is truly a strange hero. Many people do not even accept him as a hero at all. They believe he was weak and failed. He is neither a great warrior, nor an exiled prince, nor a powerful wizard. He is just a hobbit, small, ordinary being, fond of home, food and gardens, peace and everyday simple life. And perhaps precisely for this reason, he is chosen for this mission. Because the ring is always looking for pride. It is looking for ambition. It is looking for those who want to change the world, who want to command, reform, conquer. But hobbits, at least in the beginning, are not very interested in these things. They do not want the world, they only want their home. But despite this, in the end even Frodo does not remain safe from the corruption of the ring. The closer he gets to Mordor, the heavier the ring becomes. This heaviness is not only physical, it is as if the burden of history, sin, temptation, fear, and Sauron's will has fallen into his neck. Frodo is wounded many times along the way by the Morgul knife at Vedeta, by Shelob's sting, by hunger, by thirst, despair, and the constant shadow of the ring. But this main wound is inside himself. The ring slowly separates Frodo from the world, from the Shire, from the memory of home, from joy, from sleep, even from himself, in a word. The further he goes, the less he resembles a victorious hero, and the more he resembles a human being who has taken a burden beyond his strength upon his shoulders. And in the final moment at Mount Doom, where everything must come to an end, Frodo fails. He does not destroy the ring. He wants it for himself. This moment, if we look at it superficially, can be discouraging. The hero of the story, our noble and tired hobbit, after all his suffering of himself and his companions, falls at the last moment. But this very point is one of the deepest parts in the Lord of the Rings. Tolkien does not say that the human being is saved only by his own personal will. He does not say that if the hero is brave enough, he always triumphs in the final moment. He sees the world as more complicated and more human. Frodo goes as far as the limit of the possible, more than almost any other being could endure. But in the end, even he cannot completely detach himself from the ring. And exactly at this moment, Gollum returns. Gollum, a being who throughout the whole story is with us like a shadow of fall and corruption. He is the very thing that Frodo fears he will turn into. A hobbit whose name was once Smeagol, a being from a race close to the hobbits, but the ring wore him down for centuries, bent him, broke him, and turned him into something between a human and an animal and a shadow. Such interesting villain. Gollum is victim, but he is not innocent. He is corrupt, but not completely cruel. He is pitiful, but he is dangerous too. And this complexity turns him into one of Tolkien's most important characters. If Bilbo had killed Gollum years earlier, perhaps everything would have ended differently. But Bilbo, in the darkness of the caves, when he had the opportunity to kill him, held back out of pity. Later, Gandalf tells Frodo that Bilbo's pity may shape the fate of many. And this very thing happens. At Mount Doom, when Frodo claims the ring for himself, Gollum attacks him, bites the finger, takes the ring back, and in the madness of joy falls into the fire together with the ring. Here, evil devours itself. Temptation in the end destroys itself, and the pity that years earlier had seemed meaningless or even dangerous becomes the missing part in the chain of salvation. Here Tolkien comes close to one of the deepest Christian concepts, grace. Salvation is not only the result of the hero's power, nor is not only the result of the planning of the wise. Salvation happens through a strange combination of courage, suffering, weakness, pity, failure, and something beyond human calculation. Frodo is a hero, but he is not the complete savior. Gollum has fallen, but he finds a role in the final design. Bilbo had only shown pity, but that very pity saves the world. And then there is Samwise Gamgee, my wonderful grandfather, perhaps the most human and the most earthly hero of the story, who stays beside Frodo until the very last step. Sam's the beating heart of the Lord of the Rings. He's neither caught up in the philosophy of power, nor is he after a crown or a throne, nor does he see himself as a hero of history. He only wants to save his friend and master. He wants to get back home as soon as possible. He wants to see the gardens, food, and light that shine through the round windows of the Shire, and also all the Shire folks again. But this simple love is stronger than many greater powers. When Frodo can no longer walk, Sam lifts him up. Not the ring, but Frodo. This difference is very important. Sam does not say, I will carry the burden of the ring instead of you, because he knows this burden belongs to Frodo. So he says, if I cannot carry your burden, I will carry you. This is one of the most beautiful moments in the whole story. Heroism not in the form of drawing a sword, but in the form of loyalty. Not in the form of conquering, but in the form of remaining alongside someone. And perhaps that is why the Lord of the Rings is still alive after all these years, because its story is not only about kings, elves and wizards and great battles. It is about things that have meaning in our ordinary lives too. The temptation of power, the difficulty of letting go, the need for pity, and knowing the worth and value of someone who stays beside us in the darkest moments. In Tolkien's view, all these factors together produces grace, the factor of victory, a deep religious concept that Tolkien's expressed well in hidden layers and not through preaching. It is always said that Tolkien, who was himself a religious Catholic, also wove his story together with deep religious roots. And this concept of grace that I explained is also one of these concepts of Catholicism that Tolkien believed in. To explain, I, as a non-Catholic and also a non-religious person at all, value and admire only the human dimensions of these matters. But the interesting issue for me in this connection is that Tolkien does not come and express these layers through direct preaching. The thing that in all religions clergymen have done for centuries and even millennia, and what corruptions have not taken shape from these sermons that would damage people's trust. Rather, in order to guide his audience, Tolkien comes and creates a work that's deeply Catholic, not at the levels of slogans, but in its roots, in its symbols, in its moral structures, and in its view of the world. In Middle-earth, we do not see obvious religious rituals, we do not see clerics and priests, but throughout the whole work, symbols do exist. One example of this is the date of March 25th. In The Lord of the Rings, the One Ring is destroyed on the March 25th of the year 3019 of the Third Age, the same day that Sauron falls and the Dark Tower of Barad-dûr collapses. Narratively, this day is the end of the domination of darkness over whole Middle-earth. Now, why did Tolkien set this day from the beginning of his story for this event? Because in the Christian tradition, March 25th has a very important meaning. This day is the day of Annunciation, the day when the angel Gabriel gives the Virgin Mary the news that the Christ will take on flesh in her womb. In Christian theology, this is the beginning of God's entry into the human realm. It is the beginning of embodiment and incarnation. In a series of old traditions and medieval calculation too, March 25th was connected with the creation of the world, with salvation, and even with crucifixion of the Christ, meaning that in the Christian imagination, this day was not just a simple date, it was a point where creation, incarnation, and salvation symbolically overlapped. Tolkien too destroys the ring on exactly the same day, with a hidden symmetry, as if in the imaginary history of the Middle-earth too, March 25th is the day of the salvation of the world. With great subtlety, he arranged all the dates from 1 or 2 years, maybe more, earlier, with precision of the day, month, and season, in order to bring Frodo and Gollum to the edge of the cracks of doom right on the March 25th. Or, for example, on the slopes of Mount Doom, Frodo is like a human being who carries the burden of all the evil of the world around his neck. The ring is hanging on his chest, but its weight seems to have fallen on his soul. Each step becomes more difficult, each breath heavier, and the closer he gets to the fire, the more power of the ring shows itself. This ascent recalls one of the oldest images of suffering in the Christian tradition, Via Dolorosa, Christ carrying the cross towards Golgotha, falling under its weight 3 times and rising again. But don't be mistaken, Frodo is not Christ himself. J.R.R. Tolkien does not write simple and direct allegory, so Frodo is not a completely pure and flawless hero. He is just a human, just a hobbit, vulnerable, defeated, and even in the end unable to let go of the ring. Aragorn is not exactly Christ. Galadriel is not exactly the Virgin Mary, but each of them carries with them a reflection of spiritual and theological images. For example, Aragorn has many messianic descriptions. He is the hidden king, someone who at the beginning under the name of Strider is outwardly a wanderer and a guide, but in the end returns as a king. This image recalls the idea of a king who first appears in humility and service and then returns in glory. Galadriel too, in many readings, has an echo of the image of the Virgin Mary, a luminous, wise, kind, unreachable, and at the same time motherly lady. She is the source of peace and gift. She gives refuge to the Fellowship of the Ring, tests them, and gives Frodo a light that later becomes useful in the darkness of Shelob, a small light against a monster of darkness. But what's important is that Tolkien never violently imposes these symbols on the text. Instead of saying this character represents such and such a religious concept, Tolkien builds a world in which meaning shines like light through the leaves. The reader can see only a great fantasy story, but it is enough to look a little deeper, and he's faced with layers of faith, suffering, grace, humility, and salvation. And perhaps for this reason, the end of The Lord of the Ring is so affecting. Obviously, I'm talking about Sam's return home. After all those battles, after the fall of Sauron, after the return of the king, after the destruction of the ring, the story does not end with the great coronation of Aragorn. After the coronation, first they return to the Shire and have an adventure there, which we talked about in this video. And after that, Frodo sets out on his journey to the west, and after the farewell, Sam returns home. He has passed through the long road from the Shire to Mordor, from green gardens to the fire of Mount Doom. He has seen the fall of towers, seen Frodo's suffering, touches death and darkness, and the end of an age. But in the end, he returns to his home, to rosy cotton, to his children, to the yellow light of the window, to the warm fire of home, and says, "Well, I'm back." This sentence appears very simple on the surface, but perhaps it's one of the deepest endings in the fantasy literature, because it shows what all those wars were essentially for. The real victory was not that someone obtained absolute power. The real victory was not that a hero sat on a throne higher than all thrones. The real victory was that the world once again became a place where one could return home. A world in which children could sleep peacefully, food could be on tables and spreads, the lights of home could be on always, gardens could become green again, and ordinary people could have their ordinary lives. In The Lord of the Rings, evil wants to turn everything into domination. Sauron wants to see the world, control it, classify it, and bring it under its own will. He probably also sees himself in the position of good. Sauron or Hitler or Stalin or al-Baghdadi and many more others never thought that they were wicked beings with evil thoughts. All of these with their own special rings of power that they used to have at their disposal. proposal. Their message was that become the owner, control, hold everything, do not let go. But Tolkien's answer is something else. Let go, show pity, remain loyal, and return home. And set aside the power that you should not have, even if you are able to have it. Perhaps for this reason, The Lord of the Ring is not just a story of the battle between good and evil. It is a story of how good remains good, because in Tolkien's word, good does not become victorious only when it defeats evil. Good becomes truly victorious when it does not become like evil. This is the deep secret of The Lord of the Rings, to the extent that I have been able to read and understand it. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one.